Kia ora, good afternoon and welcome to our Godfreys Law seminar, Getting Your Business Going Again or Not, as the case may be. My name's Cameron, and joining me on the panel today is Andy Ogilvie and James Hobcraft from the team at Godfreys Law, also joined by Joe Dunn, a chartered accountant at PKF Goldsmith Fox. So the broad overview of today is we're going to start with the or not, with the doom and gloom of the situation, if your business won't get going again, what are the steps that you need to take? We will then move through some of the ideas that you can work through when it comes to getting your business going again in level 3 and in level 2, and then ending with me and some marketing ideas to help you cut through the white noise of everyone marketing at the moment. But because of the nature of some of the information we're discussing today, there is a disclaimer. Andy, can you read us the disclaimer, please?
I won't be reading it, Cameron, but the webinars that we have been presenting are to some extent based on information that we have received, as has everybody else in the broad community, about legislation that is proposed but not yet live. And it is also the aim of this webinar is to inform, not to provide specific business advice or legal advice for individual companies or individual situations, because each individual situation turns on its own facts, its own background and its own participants. And that's not only legal advice, but that's accounting advice as well. So please enjoy the webinar, gain from it what you can, but do not rely on this as being competent legal advice or accounting advice given. If you have a specific query that you need answering, you should approach either us as clients or your own legal or accounting advisors for answers to your own specific questions. We don't hold ourselves out to be giving legal advice. We're giving general advice as to what we know from the current situation, and applying our respective accounting and legal knowledge to those situations. So other than that, it's not a case of caveat emptor or buyer beware. It's just we're giving a broad overview and a stress that some of this information that we're imparting is based on press releases and the like that have come from the public arena and refer to proposed legislation changes. So some of them may or may not ever eventuate. So be careful.
Thanks, Andy. We've had a number of questions submitted to us prior to this webinar, and once we have done with our presentations, we will get to your questions. If during this webinar, somebody has said raises a question for you, you can use the Q&A function of Zoom to put your question in, and we will come to it at the end. But I'm going to throw back to Andy now. Andy, if what the lockdown and coming into level 3 has made you realize that actually running my business isn't sustainable and I'm not able to carry on, what options are open and available to you?
Thanks, Cameron. For those that may be tuning in for the first time or are not familiar with me, I'm Andy Ogilvie. I'm an associate here at Godfreys Law in Christchurch. My areas of expertise, apart from being a general legal practitioner, in particular employment law, commercial law, debt recovery, and associated business advice. That raises the area that I'm dancing around in most frequently, Cameron, and that is the company that's in some strife and creditors are coming and knocking. What do? We've come in from a lockdown, not much could happen, and people have probably been fairly understanding about that. Bills probably not getting paid, but things starting to get a bit tight now. Sitting back and looking at your options, you are now in level 3. Maybe you're at work, maybe you're not. Who knows how long we're going to be at level 3 and which way we'll go back. Will we go up? Will we go down? If we go down, things might get a little bit better. But the question you need to ask yourself as a small business owner or any business owner or a company director is there logically a way that I can see clear at the end of this lockdown period, or when things get back to the new norm, that my business is actually going to survive? Because you need to strike while the iron is hot. You need to take a robust view, if you have to, about, well, what is the way forward? Now, one of these areas of proposed legislation is what's being touted as a hibernation period, where your debts can be ring-fenced for a period of up to 7 months with the assistance of your creditors, to allow you to get back on your feet and trade and start addressing that debt issue. It may not work. The other options available to you are the standard Part 14 and Part 15 of the Companies Act resolutions, which broadly are a creditors' compromise, which allows a proposal towards payment of existing debts to be put to the creditors, and if approved by the creditors, they can be protected from being wound up, and gives the company a chance to trade its way out without the necessity of a receivership, which is another possibility from a secured creditor, or putting the company into voluntary administration, which is Part 15A of the Companies Act. It can also come bundled up with creditors' compromises, and also provides a moratorium against being wound up, so that the company can draw breath, so to speak. I think James is going to speak a little more fully to some of these areas, and I'll pass back to you now, Cameron.
Well, thanks, Andy. Yes, so there's, James, we've had an overview of the options available to you if it looks like you are going to have to wind up your business. Can you expand a wee bit more on some of them? So if things aren't looking good, how can business owners keep their business going?
Certainly. For those of you who are tuning in again, it's nice to see you. And for those newcomers, I'll just briefly introduce myself. My name is James Hobcraft, and I'm a new solicitor on the team at Godfreys Law. I have come to the law later in life, but that has come with some business experience for some 20 years, and during that time I've faced quite a lot of the normal sorts of problems that we see as lawyers on a regular basis. So I'm well equipped to help you, as is Andy, and give you meaningful and useful practical advice to overcome your problems. So one of the issues that I want to talk about is what happens when you are a business owner, your business is closed because of the events that we're all suffering, COVID-19, you have no income, and you have your capital being eroded, you have suppliers and other account providers sending you late payment notices, final demands, perhaps even statutory demands. One of the most useful tools that is available that people don't seem to be commonly aware of is what's called a creditor's compromise. So this is a last breath chance to save your business. What you might be looking down the barrel at is a liquidation or a receivership scenario, and you might be wanting to try and avoid that, and in a way that allows you to retain control of the process rather than other people dealing with the process. When you are faced with a whole lot of debt, a whole lot of guarantees and other things that you just don't have the means to pay, it may be that you do have something, however. You have some accounts receivable, you have some money in the bank, you have some plant and equipment, some assets, you have some things, but just not enough to deal with everybody. But if you were to face a liquidation or a receivership, inevitably what happens in the real world is a lot of that money that you had or asset gets chewed up and gobbled up in administrative costs and fees, paid out to liquidators, paid out to auctioneers, and what happens is that the creditors inevitably end up with little or nothing. So a good solution is this creditors compromise idea, which is where, and this is the sort of thing that we can help you with. You sit down and you prepare an outline of your circumstances, and that may come with some accounting assistance so that there is actually some meaningful documentation attached. And you notify everybody to say, look, we're potentially facing liquidation, we're in trouble, we recognise that we owe you money, we don't have enough, but we do have some. And what we want to do is we want to offer that to you in even shares, and I'm speaking broadly here because it's not quite as simple as that, but we want to offer you even shares in a way that will see you getting as much as possible, avoiding the delays and the inevitable losses that everybody suffers in a liquidation, and we all come out the end of it perhaps better off than we would be in a liquidation, or maybe not entirely satisfied, but everybody's made the best of a bad situation. And these compromises do require approval by creditors, and there are certain majorities and number of creditors and amounts that they're owed, and there are different classes. And these are all things we can help you understand in your particular circumstances. And just stepping aside from company matters, these sorts of proposals and compositions also exist for individuals. So if you are a sole trader, or just because you've lost your job, you're sitting in a situation where you're facing a bankruptcy scenario, then one of these insolvency processes might also be useful for you. So that is what we can help you with. That's what I wanted to talk to about. And I'm going to pass over to Joe now, because one of the things before you get to the composition is that you must really analyse the condition of your business, and in doing that, if it becomes necessary to engage in a composition scenario, that information that you've prepared with your accountant will be very useful in presenting the situation to your creditors. So that's all for me for now.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. And obviously I've come along as substitute for Dorian, who has run the last few sessions. So I've been at PKF for a couple of years. So we're chartered accountants and business advisors. And, you know, our big thing is supporting and growing businesses. So yes, we are accountants, but we also work really, really closely with our clients to actually assist them and, you know, growing the business side of things. So so first week of level 3, which is pretty I suppose it's pretty exciting insofar as we are seeing some movements. We were talking earlier about the amount of traffic on the road, and there does seem to be a lot more activity out there, which is great. So what we've seen is, you know, the first week of the lockdown was really just, everyone was pretty much in a state of shock. The couple of weeks after that, you know, we've been really, really busy doing helping clients with the wage subsidy applications, and also doing a lot of work with IRD applications and instalment arrangements. So I think Dorian touched on that last week as well, but that is something that is working really well with the IRD at the moment. And then what we found now is clients are sort of getting past those sort of emergency situations, I guess, and now a lot of people are really in that planning stage, and a big part of that planning is cash flows. So those of you that were here last week will remember that Dorian talked about the 7 causes of poor cash flow, and he did give you some homework. So the homework that he asked you to do was to just go through and write down what things you could do to improve your cash flow. So if you weren't here last week, just go through them really quickly. poor causes of poor cash flow. So your accounts receivable process, so bringing in the money that's owed to you. The flip side is your accounts payable process, your stock, your inventory, or your time, whether you're carrying stock too long or not billing your time, whether you're taking too much money out of the business potentially, or your debt structure's not ideal between maybe loans and overdrafts and that sort of thing. Quite often at the moment, actually, your overheads are too high. So your fixed costs are too high, particularly to sustain maybe a reduced level of sales at the moment. And the last two were that your gross profit margin was too low. So what that means there is that the cost to produce your product or your service, you're not really recovering that when you're selling it. And the final one was obviously that your sales are too low, which was obviously a huge thing at the moment. So hopefully you've all sort of spent a bit of time and just sort of thought about those 7 areas and where it is that you might be able to make some improvements. So part of the planning that I was talking about before, which is really, really key at the moment, is that we're really urging clients to actually sit down and prepare a cash flow forecast. So, you know, it can be as simple as plotting out on a month-by-month basis, although you can do it weekly, and maybe start at looking at what are your fixed costs, what are the things that you know are going to be going out every month, your rent, your insurance, all those sort of costs there. And obviously do review them, do look at what is it that you're paying for at the moment that you don't need to be paying for and where you can get reductions. And, you know, there's various softwares and things that we can use, but what you want to look at with your cash flow is what costs have I got that are going out, what income have I got coming in, and also really importantly, what do I need to take out of the business to survive? You know, there's no point having a cash flow that's just breaking even, your sales are covering your expenses, but there's actually nothing there for you as an owner. And I think as, you know, as business owners, it's, you know, I think it was Andy was saying before, you know, this is sort of the time, I think, for a lot of businesses to make those hard decisions. Yes, you need to know the facts and you need to know the information, but, you know, not without being sort of too doom and gloom. We've got the winter months coming up. We know that they traditionally are quite a lot harder for a number of businesses. So you really do need to plan out whether it's 3 months, 6 months or 12 months of cash flow and actually look at, have I got enough money coming in to be able to sustain my business? So what's been quite interesting is obviously, you know, at the moment you've got this sort of cycle of people can't afford to pay you, so you can't afford to pay your creditors, and it's, you know, it's really tough. And even before the lockdown, one of the big statistics is that on average you get paid your invoices 8 days late. So that's even before we went into lockdown, and I think that's sort of the first cause of a poor cash flow, which is that accounts receivable process. So putting my accountant's hat on, do you know your debtor days? Do you know on average how long it's taking your debtors to pay you at the moment? And, you know, in a tough economy, it's a lot harder to operate your business. We totally understand that. You know, customers, they don't have that money to spend, so they're possibly reprioritizing where they're spending it. You might be getting less inquiries. It might be harder to make the sale. Do your customers sort of see the value in your product that you're providing? They might be buying from you less often, or they might be putting pressure on you to reduce your prices. You know, whether that's to keep your existing customers or to entice new ones. And the other thing of it is also that suppliers, they are feeling the impact, so they could be putting their prices up. So, you know, it's really understanding the particular industry that you're in. And then what we'd recommend doing is actually doing some sort of, I suppose, like a scenario modeling insofar as, so we are level 3 at the moment. We're all hoping to be in level 2 in 2 to 3 weeks. You know, we don't have a crystal ball, but what does that mean for your business if we are in, say, level 3 until June, and then we're in level 2 until September? So yes, you know, there's a lot of information we don't have at the moment, but you'll know your particular client base and you'll know, you know, how it's likely to pan out under those different scenarios. So like I said, you know, we don't have a crystal ball, but at the end of the day, you can't put your head in the sand either. No, that's not what we recommend at the moment either. So just a few things just on how to manage your cash at the moment. And again, it's sort of reverting back to, I suppose, how to have a good cash flow is really, really important to have a good system for your debtor collection. So obviously at the moment it's, it's not easy to be asking people to pay you money at the moment when you know that everyone's in that situation where they're probably owed money. But also, we're not banks either. It's all that communication. It's actually having those upfront conversations with your customers and actually, making sure that they are paying you. I mean, if they appreciate the service that you're providing, then hopefully you can come up with an arrangement to get paid. There's some great places out there where you can actually outsource that if you do find that you're quite uncomfortable with collecting money, and they do it in a beautiful way. If you've got a good person doing it, they really are fantastic and worth their absolute weight in gold. So just really, really important. A few other things: make sure that you are communicating your terms of trade. So that needs to be done for any work and right from the beginning. So if you're sending out quotes for new work that's coming in, make sure you're sending out your terms of trade at that time there. You might want to review them. You might want to review your payment terms. So now's a really good chance to actually look at doing that. If you hold stock, or even if you are not even, I suppose, a time-based billing, look at your stock levels that you've got at the moment, and have you got stock sitting in a warehouse potentially that you're paying storage on, and that you just need to sell and you just need to move on. I think it's going to be quite interesting in the next wee while what happens with second-hand cars. There's been a lot of talk lately about there's going to be a huge flux of second-hand cars suddenly on the market, so that'll be interesting. Obviously, really important to have a personal budget and make sure that you stick with that as well. And just probably consider, if you think you can continue working, look at what other revenue streams that you can get money from. I mean, I've got quite a few customers that prior to the lockdown, they probably never would have had an online presence. 2 weeks ago, they still wouldn't have thought that they would be able to do anything online. 2 weeks later, they're online. And, I think the whole there's been a massive shift in the last couple of weeks. We've known that we're coming into this level 3. We know that there is that sort of ability to sell online. And, what's really encouraging for us is to see the businesses that are out there that are just really just working it to the best of their ability. They're pulling in the marketing experts. They're really just finding other ways of earning some sort of revenue along the way. So that's been fantastic. So yeah, I suppose my sort of takeout from today really is just as cash flow is just, please just sit down with a piece of paper and a glass of wine or whatever it takes, and actually just plan it out. So look at what expenses you've got coming out every month, look at some different scenarios of what sort of money you're hoping to have coming in, and look at where there potentially could be holes and what you can do. How big is this hole likely to be? What we don't want to see is businesses where 3, 4, 5 months down the track, they're just in this massive hole that they didn't sort of foresee coming, or that they they probably could have made those hard decisions a wee while ago. So that would be it from us. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Yes, I've been to some seminars run by PKF, Goldsmith, Fox about improving cash flow, and even something as simple like looking at your phone plan. Is there another phone plan that can offer you similar to what you're currently on that's a wee bit cheaper? And something as simple as that can go a wee bit to improving cash flow. I know I've done it myself. So thanks, Joe, for those ideas. This is my first time as more than just a host. I'm a panelist this week. I'm very, very excited to be part of the panel. My name is Cameron, and my previous life I was journalism trained before moving into marketing and a bit of PR, working with small to medium businesses around Christchurch, wider Canterbury and New Zealand. Level 3 has been very interesting. While level 4, I guess, which was a great equalizer in that lockdown applied to virtually everybody, level 3 has introduced I guess what I would say is that we're almost not all in this together. You've got some who still can't do anything, and you've got others that are almost back to full strength in terms of where they're working. So it's a very different time in which to be operating a business. Also, going into lockdown in that first week, the first email I got from the first business, which said, here's how we're adapting to level 4, we're still working for you, you know, that was great. By the 10th, I was getting a bit desensitized. By the 30th, I was completely numb to the whole process, and I wasn't really reading them. Moving into where we are now, into level 3, similarly, the first email I got and the first ad that I saw on Facebook saying, hey, we're now open, order your takeout here, contactless delivery, click and collect. The first one I saw, great, I thought that was great. And then by the 10th, I'm thinking, and by the 50th, I'm not even taking it in anymore. So that the key really here is, if you are able to trade, how can you stand out? And if you aren't able to trade, you should absolutely still be marketing, because you don't want to be quiet for fear of getting left behind. Another great seminar that you can go to by the team at PKF is the 10 Hats of Business. I can't remember all 10 off the top of my head. We'll have to come back to Joe for that later. But one of those is marketing. That as a business owner, you might have somebody as part of your team, but marketing may well fall to you. Marketing may well fall to your job as just part of running the business. What I have noticed in terms of what has really stuck out has been video. And video is an incredibly powerful tool. 90% of the ads that I have seen have been a photo of the street premises of the outside of the business and a headline saying we're now open or delivery now available. And I'm just not taking it in anymore, because that's 90% of what the ads that I am seeing from businesses. What has really cut through, and what I have seen that's been really effective, have been the business owners who have had a chat to their camera and first and foremost said thank you. That rather than saying, hey, we're now open, this is what we can do, they've actually started off by saying thank you. Thank you to our customers for being patient. Thank you for your support recently. Thank you for getting in touch and letting us know that you've been missing us, whether it's the drink or the takeaways, the food, the coffee, whatever it's been. And then in their video, they'll then go on to talk about where they're at, what they're able to do, how they're able to trade. I have seen videos where it's just been 4 minutes, a business owner talking to their audience, just them and the camera, that have been picked up by family and friends and shared. And that support, that idea of supporting local is really strong right now. And when people see that actually more than the business, that there's a person behind the business, there's a family that relies on that business, people are engaging with that story when they've just seen the business owner laying it all out and having a chat. And I have seen, without any advertising money being spent, videos being watched by over 5, 10, even upwards of 15,000 times. It's incredible. I swear, your phone is the most powerful and most sophisticated piece of marketing technology to have come about in the last 100 years. Easy. So yes, I would say swallow your fear, look down the barrel of the camera like we're doing right now on Zoom, and lay it out there. Just talk about, one, thank your customers, and then actually have you outlining what it is that you can do, whether it is contactless delivery or click and collect or what have you. Actually just getting in front of them so that they can see who you are and empathize and connect with you is incredibly powerful. There are a few other free tools that you can use as well. Hit Film is one if you really want to introduce some editing. That is a free editing software tool. There, you might find there are some others that come on your phone that will allow you to edit a wee bit and do something simple. Don't go wild though, just keep it really, really simple when it comes to video editing. And Canva is another free tool that you can use that does really simple graphic design, so that if you want to create a stunning visual image that you want to post to social media or what have you, that is another really free tool that you can use to make your posts just a wee bit more interesting. So I know lots of people are not fans of public speaking. They don't really like that idea of putting themselves out there, but if there was ever a time to connect with your customers, to show that you are more than just the product and service that you provide, get your phone out, put it into the landscape view and have a chat. Have a chat with your customers and let them know just how much they mean to you before you start getting into what you can do for them. Perfect. So that is, if there is one simple takeaway from me, that would be it. So we'll now jump into the Q&A section of the panel. We've got some questions come through the Q&A section of Zoom. Thank you. Please keep submitting your questions if you've got something more that you want to ask of us. But we have got some questions that were pre-submitted. First one, and one that many business owners are interested in. James, I've heard on the news about the government helping out commercial tenants if the landlord doesn't agree to drop the rent. Has there been any more on that?
Yesterday there was a press release which has been happening daily since the lockdown, and there was an announcement that the government is going to do something to help commercial tenants and landlord relationships, but they're not going to impose any moratoriums. They're not going to make any hard and fast requirements. They're not going to interfere with leases. What they are going to do is they're going to look at modifying the current law, which is in the Property Law Act 2007, and they're going to look to follow Australia's lead and impose a code of conduct which will require landlords to negotiate in a degree of good faith with their tenants. They were very sketchy on the details. They didn't have really any meaningful details to announce. There have been no draft bills that I've come to see. So for the moment, there is no change. So don't fall into any false sense of change that hasn't come yet. You are in a lease with your tenant or with your landlord, and there are terms and clauses in there which require a payment of rent. You may have a lease that gives you the ability to negotiate a rent abatement in a fair proportion, but really what you have is that instrument at the moment, and the possibility that something may come, which takes me back to Andy's disclaimer that we're only relaying what we've heard on the news or on the Stuff website or in the press releases. We really haven't got any proper law around this yet.
So we probably shouldn't be holding our breath hoping for some government rent relief or kind of rebate at this stage.
I would be cautious about that, because what is at stake here is a very real relationship. And if you're a tenant and you've got a factory full of equipment, can you afford to move if you're kicked out? That's a big question to ask yourself.
Thanks, James. Andy, last week you spoke a wee bit about getting your trusts sorted in case business-wise it didn't go so well. This person says, seems like I've not done all the gifting which I should have done to the trust. Is it too late to do this now?
That's a question actually that has 2 or 3 different possible answers. One's tax issues regarding gifting. They've all but disappeared. You can complete your gifting program in one fell swoop, so without any tax penalties. So that's one aspect of it. The second aspect is, why are you doing this? Is this to protect yourself against personal guarantees that you may have executed, or against any other potential claim from creditors? Then you need to look at what's the possibility or the probability of that claim or personal guarantee being called upon and not being able to meet it, and the company or myself personally, because of the personal guarantee, being called upon to honour the company debts or my own debts, whatever. Am I looking to protect that? That raises issues under the preferential payments or protections that are forbidden by both the Insolvency and Companies Act in relation to insolvent transactions. So a liquidator or official assignee could look to set aside that gift and claw it back and make hay while the sun shines out of what's left of the asset. The third thing to take into account is what is the age of the person asking this? Is the likelihood that they're going to need residential rest home care in the future, because that brings in separate considerations as regards gifting programs and periods of clear of those gifting programs. So not a simple answer, I'm sorry, Cameron, or questioner. It's very, very much fact dependent.
Right, and again, if you've got questions about your specific circumstance, then you should absolutely chat to the team at Godfreys Law to get specialised advice for you. Joe, I'm trying to work out how best I can forecast the financial performance of my business for the rest of this year. I'm unsure whether to approach this on a cash flow forecast basis using our most recent annual financial performance data, or whether I should prepare. Sorry, I've got a 2-year-old at the door. This is, at least I haven't ended up like the BBC guy with the kid marching in. Apologies for that. I'm unsure whether to approach this on a cash flow forecast basis using our most recent annual financial performance data, or whether I should prepare a forecast profit and loss report. Perhaps I need both. Can you give any guidance here?
Yeah, so basically, yes, you do need both, because there is a difference between a budget, or looking at your profit, or your sales minus your expenses, and your cash flow, because there's going to be items that don't form part of your profit, which is what you pay your tax on, but they are still cash items. So obviously, principal loan repayments are a big part of that potentially. You've got your owner's drawings that you're taking out of the business, and tax payments as well potentially. So your profit on paper could look good, but your cash flow quite often does not reflect the profit because of these other sort of items. So you need to look at the two together.
Right, thanks, Joe. James, moving into alert level 3 has been interesting in terms of what people can and can't do. Some of our team are really quiet because the demand for the products they work on has dried up. Can we leave some of our employees on 80% of their work pay for now, but bring the rest of the staff who can do their jobs back up to 100%?
Well, whenever you want to modify your employment arrangement with the particular staff member, you must do that in a consultation with that person and with mutual agreement. You can't unilaterally walk in as an employer and start making adjustments. It's just not fair. And besides, let's not forget you have a contract with that person which requires you to give them certain hours or to pay them certain amounts of money. You can't just be changing that because you want to or because it suits your business, ordinarily speaking. So having a need for some people to be returning to 100% of their work time and the appropriate pay rate, and for some to remain at 80% is probably a very rational business model in the current environment. But you must discuss with those affected people individually and obtain their agreement.
Great, thanks, James. Andy, I've been thinking about the health and safety obligations that I owe to my staff during level 3 and beyond. I'm wondering what I should look to do if one of my employees comes to work and exhibits signs of sickness and is coughing. Can I ask this employee to leave work and put them on sick leave? Can I also ask them to go and get a medical certificate to clear that whatever it was that they had wasn't COVID-19, and then ask them to come back?
All sorts of spectres arise there, Cameron. Firstly, what can you and can't you do is primarily governed by what's in your agreement. That's your starting point. Most employment agreements that have been created rather by competent people rather than the cut and paste model off the MBIE website will have a section in there about medical requirements and the ability of the employer to require medical certificates to be provided under certain circumstances, and if that's there, you can invoke that clause. The other issue that would arise is the health and safety of other participants in the workplace, whether they be workers or clients. You have an obligation, and as does the worker have an obligation under the Health and Safety at Work Act, to keep people safe. If there is a risk, and even the slightest sneeze, cough and sniffle these days has a potential risk, and it's a real risk, that it could be something other than a cold or standard influenza or a little just an irritating cough. So my view would be that the employer would be within his or her rights to invoke the Health and Safety in Employment Act. But of course, you've got to look at how you're going to deal with this. Does the worker have the appropriate amount of sick leave to take this as sick leave, or are you going to make it special leave pending the receipt of the medical certificate, either clearing or confirming that the worker is safe or not to come back to work? And in that regard, should the person be in a compromised position, the vulnerable people's special leave provisions under the rescue plan from the government is still able to be accessed, and has in fact been extended. So yeah, again, it's somewhat fact dependent, Cameron.
Great, thanks, Andy. We have just had a couple come through for you, Joe. What's the process for arranging delayed tax payment with the IRD?
So it is very straightforward at the moment. So the easiest way to do it is if you have a MyIR, which is the online login with the Inland Revenue. And if you don't, I'd recommend getting that set up. And then what you do is go in there and send in correspondence to the Inland Revenue, and you just need to let them know the frequency of the payment, how much you can afford to pay per instalment, and when you want these instalments to start from, and then just do a wee, suppose, narration and to say that it's to do with the lockdown and the business being affected by that. And yeah, we're finding that we are getting responses that day from Inland Revenue, so we're finding they're pretty straightforward. If you really can't access MyIR or don't have that sort of ability, then I would talk to your accountant, and then they would be able to put that application in for you.
Great. I've also seen in the news recently about $17 million paid out by the government in wage subsidies has been clawed back, or they have asked for it back at least. And this person asks, we don't know much about what the audit requirements will look like regarding the wage subsidy. Should we be looking at a comparison of cash revenue in or projections, or is the 30% reduction on an invoices basis?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my understanding is it's obviously it's based on your revenue, which, putting my accountant hat on, would be what has been invoiced. and looking at that on a month-by-month comparison. So, you know, we don't know what the audit requirements are yet at this stage, but presumably if you're GST registered and you're putting through GST returns, it's not hard for that information to get passed on, looking at what did you return this year and what did you return the same period last year. So I don't know if there's going to be an overall audit of every application, or they're just going to sort of select some. If you, but what I would say is if you applied in good faith, but circumstances have changed and you're actually not going to have that 30% decline, then definitely talk to your accountant or business advisor on what to do from there.
Great, thanks, Joe. James, can shareholders be legally accountable for the debts of a company if that company goes into liquidation? I know directors can face personal liability for certain actions or inactions. What about shareholders?
Right, so the standard presumption is that shareholders are insulated from the risk of the company. That's why it's called limited liability. But in saying that, first of all, that's only if the shares have been paid. If they're unpaid shares, then a liquidator could call on that unpaid portion to be paid by those people. Secondly, as a shareholder, they may have been required to give a personal guarantee to company funding, or hire purchase lease agreements, or manner of things. So they won't be insulated from that, and it won't be the liquidator that comes after them. It will be the companies or parties that they've given guarantees to. And then last of all, just because there may not be a liability, so to speak, to a debt, it may be that shareholder has an overdrawn current account because they've been taking drawings rather than PAYE type earnings from the company, or perhaps the company's made some advance in anticipation of a dividend or something like that hasn't eventuated. So Joe can probably speak better to that kind of outcome, but there's always a need, if the company is facing liquidation, for a shareholder to check, first of all, do I have an overdrawn current account? Have I offered any personal guarantees? And are my shares fully paid?
Do you want to add anything more to that, Joe?
No, I think James sort of explained that really well, but in layman's terms, an overdrawn current account is where you have taken out more money from the company than you have put in, effectively. So as at a point of time, you owe the company money. That's what an overdrawn current account is.
Great. Going from James, and might I get you to chime in on this one too, Andy. I'm getting final demands from my suppliers. What should I do?
Whenever you receive a final demand, a statutory demand, or a notice like that, you really must take it seriously. Do not put your head in the sand, because especially with the more formal statutory demand, often identified because it will say that it's a statutory demand or a section 289 demand, if you receive something like that, then there are time frames that attach to that which allow you to do things such as negotiating or arguing about the debt. And once those time frames extinguish, you're out of luck. And whilst there's a bit of talk, and Andy will talk a little bit about the safe harbour stuff which has been getting talked about, what we have noticed is that there hasn't actually been any modification as yet to the statutes. There are no bills that I've seen proposing the changes, and so I think as lawyers we have to tell you to be cautious and to realise that the law is the law today, and those time frames that are attached to those types of demands are running and do apply. So do something about it. Do you have something to add there, Andy?
Any comfort to somebody in that situation, the good news is that the courts aren't sitting at the moment, so you are going to have some time. However, it's going to be costly. It's going to cost you, and it's not a good hit, particularly if a judgment has been applied for. It's not a good hit on your credit record. So don't just pick up the phone and speak to the to the person that issued the statutory demand and say, I'll pay you Monday, in the usual way that anybody that's been associated with collecting any form of debt always gets the standard, I'll pay you Friday, I'll pay you Monday, I'll pay you next month. It's not going to cut the mustard. I'm sorry, you know, you've got very tight time frames. And interestingly, there's no ability for the High Court to extend those timelines. So it's precluded, specifically precluded as a power for the court to extend a timeline. So if you don't act, you're on to the next stage, whatever that may be. Safe harbour, not sure whether that's going to protect you from a statutory demand issued by somebody who you haven't notified of your proposal for safe harbour. It certainly would, under what we understand safe harbour is going to do. It's just, again, one of these things that has been talked about but not yet crystallised into legislation or action or any adoption whatsoever by the courts or other bodies. As far as I'm concerned, demands continue to be issued and need to be responded to in the appropriate timeframes. So yes, time is of the essence.
Great, thanks, Andy. We've just got one marketing question that's come through. If you've got any other questions, please submit them through the Q&A. Otherwise, I'll answer this question and we'll be signing off for the afternoon. Presently, we're marketing our business in the online space with what seems like the rest of New Zealand. Too right. I'm keen to know how we can get our message out there in a way that's heard above all the other marketing noise. Feels like wherever we look, everyone has rushed online to push their services or products. I'm interested in any specific things we should be focusing on to ensure that our clients see and hear our message. Now, that's really interesting. The part of that question that I'm finding most interesting is our clients, which is, I think, a great place to start. It is 10 times easier to sell to somebody who has already bought from you than what it is to try and find a new client. I'm seeing with the ads that are popping up whenever I go online, businesses that I have never heard of and have had no interaction with. And when I'm not quite sure what this says about me, but by the time that I see the fifth ad come through about click and collect and we'll have beer and wine delivered to your door, you know, I'm not taking it in anymore, and I'm much more likely to go to somebody that I have already purchased from. So here, what I would say absolutely is focus on engaging with people who already know you, have already purchased from you. Look to connect with them before you look to just kind of take a shotgun approach and shoot your message out there and see what sticks. So there, I would go back to what I said before about video. If people have purchased from you, they're likely to know you. They're far more likely to engage with actually having seen you rather than a photo of something that you have taken. If you are not comfortable talking on video, I would really insist on, if you're putting stuff online, using original photos. Don't go to a stock photo website. And where possible, have people in those photos, preferably people that your customers are going to know and recognize. So whether that's you, whether that's your team, however it is that you're making that work, people are far more likely to engage with an image of another person than what they are of a product or of a photo of the outside of your premises. I would also say that there is a real temptation, and Facebook is really good at this, of sending you notifications saying, hey, you haven't boosted a post in a while, do you want to do this? And they make that blue boost button underneath your posts really enticing. And my suggestion is don't do it. Don't click that blue button, because there are it's much more of a scattergun approach. It gives you very limited options when it comes to targeting people. And so I would recommend that if you have the time and the patience and the inclination to go to business.facebook.com, set up a business account and look through the ads manager there, and it gives you far more detail when it comes to who you're targeting. I am the first to admit, and this is what I do day in and day out, I'm the first to admit that it is not user-friendly and it is not set up for ease and convenience. So if there is, I would say stick with it. Another free tool that you can use is MailChimp, and that is a way of sending emails out to your customers. It's also useful in that it helps you manage privacy concerns where you are gathering people's information. I know I have received old school newsletters where somebody's created a PDF document, and then they have gone send to all, and they have CC'd everybody in instead of done the BCC, which means that I have then seen all of the email addresses, which is a big no-no when it comes to privacy. Also with that kind of thing, there is new legislation around making sure that people have the opportunity to opt out when it comes to mailing lists as well. And so in addition to making sure that you're sending beautiful emails, MailChimp also helps you manage those privacy concerns and legal requirements as well. That is free if you have fewer than 2,000 subscribers, or you send fewer than 10,000 emails. So again, if you have the time and the patience and the inclination, that is something to look into. I do have one more question here.
Cameron?
Oh, yes, Andy.
Just on that last question, I echo your thoughts that the approach to your existing clients is the best that you can do. And by way of example, I was out on a constitutional walk during lockdown, and my cell phone went, and it was a vineyard from down in central Otago who were going through their mailing list and said, look, we've got a 15% special at the moment and free delivery. Would you be interested in buying some wine? How could I refuse an offer like that?
So did they call you, Andy?
It was the personal approach.
So yeah, that's what I'm saying. Did you get a phone call? A
phone call, yeah. He was going through the lists that he had dispatched stock to previously, and picking the notification numbers off there and ringing up and introducing himself and making the offer. And it was absolutely fantastic. You know, it wasn't hard sell or high pressure sell. It was more of a chat saying, we're here, we're still going, and are you interested because we've got this deal?
That sounds like a great approach to take, especially taking it more of the conversational kind of tone rather than the hard sell. And if you have the time and you've got the customer information, absolutely giving somebody a call just to say, hey, how are you doing? And clearly, and did you order some wine, Andy?
And it arrived the next day, Cameron.
Oh, and that, I can't stress that enough as well. If you are online, that fast response is one thing, and the fast delivery is another, because we have, as a society, become incredibly impatient, and a great way to turn somebody into a repeat customer is to take care of them. If you say that you are going to do something, make sure that you follow through and do it. Okay, this question here, I think for you, James, and you, Andy, we're back working in a factory. We're on the essential work list. One of our machine operators says he doesn't want to come back until we reach level 2, as his wife has a heart problem and he's got 2 young children. He also tells us that he's left town and he's out of town for the duration of the lockdown. We urgently need him back to be operational. What are our rights?
Well, it's again somewhat fact dependent, I would think. Is the wife that he is caring for and is health compromised, is she up in Gisborne with him? Otherwise, why isn't he looking after her or keeping, he doesn't have to go back there. But the other question that springs to my mind over this question is, well, Mr. Employer, what would happen if the man had actually been hit by a bus? Is this the only person in your organisation that can operate that particular machine? Because you must shut down for Christmas, so you must have holidays sometime, you must be off sick sometimes. It's a question of what's reasonable, what's good and good, acting in good faith towards him. One side of the argument is that, of course, it would appear on its face to be a lawful and reasonable instruction. I want you back at work. We have work available. Are you ready, willing and able? He's not willing. He should be ready, and he's probably able.
So I would add just a cautionary note to all employers, and that is that, as Andy said, ordinarily you would be able to insist that people come to work in a normal situation, but there are some exemptions at the moment that may or may not apply depending on people's particular facts. So before barraging off an email to that employee demanding that they return to work, just make some inquiries first about their particular circumstances and consider whether or not the leave payment might be something suitable, and to get another worker to fulfill that role in the short term. Just take your time and treat carefully.
Another thing too would be, what sort of precautions would you be taking at the workplace to make sure that there was little or no risk, as much as we can in these interesting times, of the worker contracting or coming into contact with somebody with the dreaded lurgy?
Definitely a relevant consideration, and also a consideration that shouldn't be overlooked in relation to health and safety at work obligations all employers are facing at the moment.
Perfect. Any final thoughts from you, Joe, before we end today's webinar?
Yeah, I suppose just the big thing for me is that there's a lot of information out there at the moment, and there's a lot of misinformation at the moment. So if it's something you're not sure about, just talk to your trusted advisors. So whether it's your lawyers, your accountants, your bank, it's just really important to get that information, because we've had I've had clients say to me, oh, I hear something about a loss carryback. Does that mean all my prior year's losses get refunded into cash? And it's just a lot of stuff there that even we're sort of grappling to get our heads around. So really just make sure that you are talking to people and getting that information.
Cameron, right. If I could just go back to where I started this webinar today, about where to if you are sitting on your hands and going, oh, woe is me, what can I do? And you've taken on board Joe's advice to do your cash flows and all the rest of it, and look at the big picture going forward. And you decide that some form of intervention or time to walk away is near, tune in next week, because we might have some more information about the liquidation process or the other processes that a qualified liquidator or administrator would be able to help you with.
Great, thank you, Andy. I would say that this webinar will be posted to the Godfreys Law website. If you head to godfreyslaw.co.nz, and right there in the bar up the top, you'll see a button that says COVID-19 resources, where you'll find this webinar and a whole bunch of other webinars and articles where the team at Godfreys Law have discussed on different topics and areas around running a business during this time. So you'll find it there. You will also find our contact details so that if you want to get in touch with Joe, James, Andy, or myself for any further questions, you'll be able to find our contact details there too. Thank you so much for tuning in on this sunny Thursday afternoon, and make sure you tune in next week for the next part in our webinar series. Thank you so much and have a great afternoon. Cheers.
Brilliant. Thanks all.